Before I begin today's teaching, I want to emphasize one point. While listening to Dharma teachings, in addition to maintaining a joyful attitude, you should also remember that everything is impermanent. When I was young, I received teachings from the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche and many other esteemed masters. I feel nostalgic when I reflect on those experiences. However, the past is gone, and nothing can return. Similarly, many of you have gathered here for the Dharma, which brings immeasurable benefits to your lives and is an extremely rare opportunity. Therefore, you must appreciate it, for no one knows when impermanence will strike. If this opportunity disappears, you may find yourself feeling nostalgic years later when recalling the experience of studying the Dharma with everyone here today. With the blessings of the Guru and the Three Jewels, we have this rare opportunity to study the Dharma together, so we must feel joyous and grateful. Now we are examining the section on when the 7 harmful acts of body and speech are permitted. This is a very important topic. Those who haven't studied the fundamental teachings often become confused and are unsure of what to do or what not to do. Therefore, we must understand when harmful acts are permitted. Yesterday, we discussed the stories of Captain Compassionate Heart and a Brahmin named Lover of the Stars. Bodhisattvas like them possess a profound altruistic mindset and are free from selfishness, greed, anger, and ignorance. Although their actions may appear to involve unethical killing or sexual misconduct, in reality, their intentions are virtuous. Aryadeva states in the 400 stanzas on the middle way, "For bodhisattvas, through their intention, all actions, virtuous and non-virtuous, become perfect virtue because they are in control of their minds." Bodhisattvas have a strong intention to benefit sentient beings, so their actions and speech, whether outwardly positive or negative, can all become perfectly virtuous. Why? Because bodhisattvas are altruistic and in control of their minds, they can always act virtuously. Bodhisattvas who are completely free of selfish thoughts and who are courageous, wise, and uphold great righteousness may, in special cases, take wealth from those who are extremely greedy and possessive, in order to offer it on their behalf to the Three Jewels or give it to beggars and the needy. A Buddhist once told me that his family strongly opposed his studying the Dharma or making offerings, but they fully supported his expenses related to travel and sightseeing. As a result, he often lied to his family, claiming he was about to travel somewhere, and then took part of the money to a temple to contribute to Dharma activities. Chan Master Yongming Yancho utilized a significant amount of public funds from the National Treasury for releasing lives before he was ordained as a monk. His misappropriation of public funds was discovered, leading to his death sentence. However, he did not regret his actions, stating, "It is worthwhile to exchange my life for the lives of tens of thousands of beings." The emperor was so moved that he set the Chan master free. Thus, if you steal out of selfish motivation, but use helping others as an excuse, your actions are certainly vicious. However, if your intention is purely to help others, stealing may sometimes be permissible. Consequently, some harmful actions we observe or hear about may be the skillful means of bodhisattvas who are benefiting others. Yet we must not carelessly imitate these actions before we have reached the same high state of realization. Many people like to quote the first half of a verse that states, "Alcohol and meat go through my stomach, but the Buddha stays in my heart." These words from Chan Master Ji Gong are often cited by individuals to justify their compulsive consumption of meat and alcohol. However, most people are only familiar with the first half of this verse and are unaware of the second half, which states, "If worldly people imitate me, they are entering the demon's path." Without knowing the second half of Ji Gong's words, they are often misinterpreted, misleading many deluded individuals. In fact, the profound inner state of Qigong is beyond the imagination of an ordinary person. For instance, a ministry counselor named Shen sent his servant to deliver 2 cooked dove and a pot of wine to Qigong. The servant secretly ate a dove wing and drank a few sips of wine on the way, believing no one would know, not even a celestial being. However, Qigong pointed out what the servant had just done. Of course, the servant denied it. Qigong then spat out 2 pigeons, one of which was missing a wing. Such an extraordinary inner state is incomprehensible to worldly people, so we must not blindly imitate his behavior, lest we deceive both ourselves and others. In fact, there is a historical account of the saying, "Alcohol and meat go through my stomach, but the Buddha stays in my heart." According to this account, during a war, Chan Master Poshan of the late Ming Dynasty had to stay in the military camp of Li Liang, a grassroots leader of a rebellious assembly. Li Liang was a bloodthirsty persecutor, so to save the locals, the Chan Master asked him to abstain from unnecessary killing. Li noticed the Chan Master's strict observance of precepts, including his abstention from meat and alcohol, and told the master, "As long as you eat meat, I won't kill anyone anymore." The Chan Master immediately struck a deal with Li Liang and began to eat meat and drink alcohol. As a result, many people survived. Additionally, another monk from the Ming Dynasty ate meat and drank alcohol in front of burglars to save refugees in a temple. The burglars offered to release the refugees if the monk consumed their meat and drank their wine. The monk calmly raised the wine cup, saying, "I toast with wine instead of tea," and gulped it down. He then picked up the meat and said, "I replace my vegetables with this meat." He remained composed throughout. The burglars were surprised, but since they had already promised, they had to set the refugees free. As you can see, the actions of eating meat and drinking alcohol to benefit others can also be found among great masters of Chinese Buddhism. Nevertheless, this is not a common practice. Not all members of the Sangha in each Tibetan monastery can act in such an extraordinary manner. Those who pursue the Dharma in Tibet should understand the significance Tibetan Buddhism places on the observance of precepts. Before attaining certain levels of realization, no one is permitted to perform extraordinary acts. Those who have engaged in such acts may or may not have reached the necessary level of realization. Therefore, it is essential to know what you can and cannot do. It makes no sense for someone without a state of realization to pretend to have one and thereby commit wrongdoings. Of course, if you have indeed attained an extraordinary state of realization, it is acceptable to act eccentrically, like a madman or a mute, especially in accordance with the 21 acts of the Great Perfection. After all, the Dharma path should not be constrained to a single approach. It certainly does not work if we measure everything by the yardstick of pratimoksha, or the precepts of individual liberation. Conversely, it also does not make sense to require everyone to practice extraordinary tantric activities, regardless of the practitioner's state of realization. Therefore, it is important to study and understand the fundamentals of these issues. We have just discussed when the 3 harmful acts of the body are permitted. Next, we will address when the 4 harmful acts of speech are permitted. Lying is acceptable if it is done to save someone's life or to protect the possessions of the 3 jewels. For example, if a hunter is pursuing his prey and a practitioner happens to see where the animal is heading, the practitioner may deliberately respond to the hunter's inquiry by saying, "I don't know," to save the animal's life. To protect the goods belonging to the 3 jewels, a practitioner can lie to burglars by saying, "I don't have the key," or "his possessions are not here." Lying in such circumstances is permitted. However, it is never right to deceive others for one's own benefit. During the time of the Buddha, a woman's son suddenly fell ill and died. Unable to accept the reality, she begged the Buddha to bring her son back to life. The Buddha comforted her, saying, "Oh, it's not hard. Go get a mustard seed from a household where no one has ever died, and I will revive your son." The woman, somewhat naive, went from house to house in search of such a mustard seed. She traveled far and searched for a long time, but still couldn't find one. Eventually, she realized that nobody is immortal, and she accepted the reality of her son's death. What the Buddha told her at that time was a skillful lie. However, it is definitely not permitted to lie if a person has malicious or selfish intentions or has become a habitual liar. Lying in those circumstances leads to significant faults. For example, if two close friends are involved, one prone to wrongdoing and the other inclined to do good, it may be justified to sow discord if there is a risk that the stronger negative influence of the wrongdoer could corrupt the virtuous friend. Regarding the faults of having a bad friend, the Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma states, if one gets close to a vicious person, one will become a vicious person. Therefore, one should distance oneself from wrongdoers and abstain from wrongdoing. Consequently, we should avoid associating with a vicious person. Otherwise, we may gradually begin to behave in a similar manner. However, some individuals may choose to remain with wrongdoers and disregard honest advice. In such cases, it is appropriate to sow discord and deliberately separate them from their bad friend. However, it is not acceptable to simply separate two individuals who share a good relationship. Harsh words may be employed as a more forceful or wrathful method to teach the Dharma to those who do not respond to gentler approaches. They can also be used when guiding a disciple to uncover and address their hidden flaws or weaknesses. A guru should not always be a Mr. Nice or Mrs. Nice, avoiding the identification of anyone's faults. As Atisha states, the best teacher is one who confronts your hidden flaws. The best teaching is that which directly addresses those hidden flaws. However, harsh words spoken solely to insult others are not justified. When a teacher is imparting the Dharma, many disciples may feel that the teacher is criticizing them, perceiving themselves as targets every day. When disciples think this way, it indicates that the instructions have struck at the core of their faults. Conversely, if a disciple finds the teacher's instructions irrelevant, it becomes impossible to recognize their own faults, leading to a decline in their behavior. Therefore, it is acceptable for a teacher to criticize their disciples. Although, in terms of their Buddha nature, all beings are equal, with no distinction of inferiority or superiority, from a relative perspective, a disciple's qualities in the threefold training of discipline, meditation, and wisdom are unlikely to match those of the guru. This is similar to the way that, in any school, students do not earn the same as their teachers. Thus, it is permissible for a guru to occasionally use harsh words with their disciples to tame them. One should not think, the guru speaks harshly, so he must have violated his precepts. According to the Sutra of 100 Actions, one harsh comment results in this or that in the next 500 lives. It is unreasonable to judge the guru in this manner. It could serve as a skillful means to introduce the Dharma to those who enjoy talking and may not be interested in the Dharma through other avenues. Some novice Buddhists like to spend considerable time sharing their stories. If you want to engage these talkative individuals but refuse to converse with them, it may demotivate them and hinder their progress on the path. Therefore, at the outset, you should align with their preferences. If such a person enjoys topics like wars or Hollywood films, you may join the conversation. Once, I met someone who was incredibly enthusiastic about Hollywood films. He would talk continuously all night, and the next morning, he would still be on that topic. In this case, I had to skillfully integrate his interests into our conversations. During the time of Buddha Kashyapa, a great bodhisattva sought to tame and guide Tirthakas, so he deliberately behaved like them and slandered the Buddha, saying, "That bald-headed monk has no path to liberation." By doing so, the bodhisattva earned the Tirthakas' trust and eventually skillfully guided them onto the path of the Dharma. Due to his virtuous intentions, his actions accumulated no faults, but rather merit. The Bodhisattva Manjushri had a similar experience while propagating Mahayana Buddhism among Tirthakas. The mindset of worldly people is completely different from that of practitioners. If skillful means are not applied, and you refuse to say even a worthless word from the beginning, it becomes impossible to truly guide them. Therefore, in order to lead them onto the Buddhist path, it is permissible to use some skillfully crafted worthless chatter. However, if what you say is completely meaningless, causes distractions for yourself, and stirs up greed, anger, and ignorance in others, then such senseless talk is not permitted. The 7 negative actions of body and speech mentioned above are permitted only if they benefit living beings. The 3 negative actions of mind are never permitted for anyone, as there is no way for intention to render them positive. Once a negative thought arises, it inevitably leads to something negative. The precious garland of the middle way states, "With greed, anger, and ignorance, the actions one commits are negative. Without greed, anger, and ignorance, the actions one commits are positive." Therefore, the 3 negative mental actions are never permitted for anyone. It is essential to understand that everything arises from the mind. The Flower Ornament Sutra states, "All karmas arise from the mind." That's why it says the mind is illusory. When freed from the conceptualizations of the mind, all kinds of existence will cease. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma says, "Everything is created by the mind. Everything is caused by the mind. Thus, it is solely the mind that produces both good and bad. A good mind brings happiness, while a bad mind brings suffering." The precious garland of the middle way says, "Non-virtue leads to all sufferings and rebirth in lower realms. Virtue results in rebirth in higher realms, enjoying happiness, life after life." There are many occasions when the thoughts that arise in the mind, even if they are never spoken or acted upon, can have a powerful effect, either deeply positive or significantly negative. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma says, if one listens to the Dharma, understands the meaning, and generates a moment of good thought, it can terminate the cycle of life and death in infinite kalpas. This afternoon, Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro called me and asked, "What are you up to?" I replied, "In a state of joy." I said, "I read a wonderful verse from the Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma, which reminded me that listening to the Dharma is unparalleled compared to anything else." He asked, "What exactly does the verse say?" I recited the verse to him and shared that this instruction from the Buddha is truly profound. Indeed, the most meaningful pursuit is for us to study and contemplate the Dharma. Of course, it is also commendable to work for the benefit of all beings and to tame our own defilements. Beyond that, all worldly trivialities hold little genuine meaning. People possess diverse values and lifestyles. Those of us who have had the opportunity to immerse ourselves in the environment of listening to and contemplating the Dharma at Larangar truly appreciate the emergence of even a single positive thought. Of all the virtuous deeds, my favorite is teaching the Dharma every day. Why is this? It is because it's impossible for me to teach the Dharma while harboring negative thoughts. In that moment, all the doors to unwholesome thoughts are closed, creating a precious opportunity. Similarly, when people attend Dharma class, 70 to 80% of the time, their minds focus on the teaching. This is quite good for ordinary beings, even if they occasionally generate a few discursive thoughts. You may also take time to contemplate this thoroughly. As practitioners, we should constantly examine our minds. If our thoughts are positive, we should feel happy and strive to do even better. If they are negative, we should confess them immediately, feeling regret and shame for still harboring such thoughts, despite all the teachings we've received. We must remind ourselves to make every effort to prevent such thoughts from arising in the future. If we can achieve this, it is in itself a form of practice. In fact, all the profound and vast teachings from the Buddhas of the three times can be summarized into two key principles: positive thoughts and positive actions. The great Jigme Punsok Rinpoche states in the summary of teachings of the Buddhas of three times, all the profound and vast teachings of the Buddhas of the three times can be encompassed by good thoughts and actions. Those fortunate ones should practice accordingly. I vividly remember when the great Jigme Punsok Rinpoche visited Washington, Boston, and other cities in the United States. He provided many profound instructions to Western audiences. Although Rinpoche's words sounded simple, they brought significant benefits to many listeners. Even though the audience might have heard teachings from numerous great masters, through Rinpoche's instruction, they came to deeply understand that the essence of the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha is the kindness of the mind. What the great Jigme Punsok Rinpoche emphasized during that time is this instruction from Patrul Rinpoche's text. Therefore, we must remember that everything will go well if the mind is positive. Conversely, if the mind is negative, no matter how many positive actions we undertake, they will be in vain. Regarding the merit of kind-heartedness, here's a story from the moral education of the past. There once was a person named Yuan Zishi, who offered great help to another named Mu Cai. However, Mu Cai was ungrateful and did something hurtful to Yuan Zishi. Angered, Yuan Zishi went out before dawn with a knife, intending to kill Mu Cai. As he passed by a retreat hut, a good practitioner with clairvoyance named Xuanyun Wang was reciting morning prayers. The practitioner noticed a few hundred aggressive and oddly shaped ghosts following Yuan Zishi, armed with knives and axes. Soon after, Yuan Zishi returned, this time accompanied by joyful celestial beings wearing gold crowns and jade ornaments, carrying flowers and victory banners. The practitioner was surprised, so he asked Yuan Zishi what was happening. Yuan Zishi replied, "Mu Cai is a wretched ingrate, and I wanted to kill him. However, when I arrived at his door, I suddenly thought to myself, although he did something bad to me, his wife and children are innocent. Furthermore, his mother is still alive. If I were to kill him, it would be as if I were killing his entire family. I could not bear to think of that, so I changed my mind and came back." The practitioner then shared with Yuan Zishi what he had witnessed and praised him, saying, "The gods are aware of your actions, and you will surely be blessed." Upon hearing this, Yuan Zishi became more diligent and committed to virtuous actions. Eventually, he excelled in the imperial examinations and was promoted to a high government position. In contrast, Mu Cai led a miserable life and died prematurely. As you can see, if a person harbors very evil thoughts, demons and non-humans will come to exacerbate the situation. Conversely, if a person nurtures kind thoughts, such as the great compassion of helping all beings, faith in the Guru and the Three Jewels, pure perception, and a joyful attitude, then not only will that person be happy, but their surroundings will also become harmonious. Everyone must have a clear understanding of this truth. Therefore, even when you're engaging in positive actions, carefully examine your motivation. If your intention is good, proceed. However, if you're acting to show off, compete, or gain fame, work on changing your mindset and infuse your actions with bodhicitta. If you cannot transform your motivation, it's better to postpone the positive action until you can do it with the right intention. The Sutra on the Buddha's bequeathed teachings states, lack of control over the mind leads to a cessation of positive actions. Therefore, if our motivation is not well adjusted, even the most positive actions may yield no real benefits. One day, Geshe Ben Kumyal was preparing for a visit from many of his benefactors. That morning, he neatly arranged the offerings on his shrine in front of the images of the three jewels. However, upon reflecting on his intentions, he realized they were impure. He was merely trying to impress his patrons. So he grabbed a handful of dust and scattered it over the offerings, saying, "Monk, stay in your place and don't pretend to be something you're not." When Padampa Sangye heard this story, he remarked, "That handful of dust Ben Kumgyal threw was the finest offering in all of Tibet." According to folk customs, Tibetans typically throw dust at demons and evildoers. For example, one throws a handful of dust during an exorcism practice or during the departure of a foe. Although Tibetans are not affluent, they enjoy offering their most cherished possessions to representations of the three jewels. So why did Padampa Sangye comment that Ben Kumgyal's dust was the best offering? This is because Geshe Ben examined his intentions and recognized that they were not pure, so he threw the dust as a self-admonishment. According to legend, a prankster once called out, "Ben Kumyal is coming," behind an old woman, but surprisingly, she didn't move at all. The prankster thought the old woman was undisturbed, but when he went to check on her, he discovered she had already died of fear. Ben Kumgyal had been such a wicked person. Before his ordination, he carried many weapons with him and had numerous enemies. After his ordination, thanks to the blessings of the Guru and the three jewels, he carried no weapons, not even a needle, and all his enemies vanished. So always watch your mind carefully, just as Ben Kumgyal did. Once you realize your intention is so evil that you may commit misdeeds, you should confess and avoid any planned actions. As ordinary beings, it's inevitable that we will have thoughts and actions driven by negative intentions. Just like Ben Kumgyal, despite being ordained and spending many years in retreat, he still frequently contended with afflictions. However, if we can quickly recognize our mistakes, confess them, and commit to not repeating them, we can free ourselves from their grip. On another occasion, Geshe Ben was visiting the home of some benefactors. When his host stepped out of the room, he thought, "I don't have any tea. I'll just take a little to brew when I return to my hermitage." But as soon as he reached into their bag of tea, he suddenly realized what he was doing and shouted to his hosts, "Come and see what I'm doing. Cut off my hand." A person like Ben Kumgyal, who could always recognize wrongdoing, is very precious. Yan Hui, the favorite disciple of Confucius, was also able to blame no one and repeat no mistakes. Many of us tend to hide our mistakes or blame others when we commit wrongdoings. The standards for being a good student and child says, if one can change the misdeed, its fault is gone. If one hides the misdeed, one commits one more misdeed. If a misdeed can be corrected, its fault no longer exists. After all, no one is born a sublime being who commits no misdeeds. However, one may try to cover up a misdeed saying, "It's not me who did it. It was him. I am not a wrongdoer, but he is. You may go talk to him." By doing so, one simply commits another misdeed. Atisha once said, "Since I took the precepts of personal liberation, I have not been tainted by even the slightest fault." In following the Bodhisattvas, I have made 1 or 2 mistakes. And, since taking up Vajrayana, although I have occasionally faltered, I have never allowed any faults or downfalls to remain unresolved for even a full day. While traveling, whenever a negative thought arose, he would immediately take up the wooden mandala base he carried to confess the thought and vow never to repeat it. It is difficult for most of us to emulate Atisha because we often are not concerned when we have a negative thought, or we may not even realize it. Thus, a good practitioner and a bad practitioner act quite differently. The Mahaparinirvana Sutra says, there are 2 kinds of people in this world who are as precious as the Udambara flower. One kind are those who never commit wrongdoings, and the other are those who confess their wrongdoings. Such people are very rare to find. These 2 kinds of people are as rare as the Udambara flower. The first kind, who never commit any misdeeds in samsara, are like precious lotuses born in the fire. The second kind commit wrongdoings due to their habitual tendencies, but can recognize this immediately and purify their negative actions by reciting the Vajrasattva mantra. Recently, a chief of staff at Larangar was addressing the Sangha in Tibetan. He overlooked the language requirement at our Buddhist institute that prohibits mixing Tibetan and Chinese in a single talk and used the word tractor in Chinese instead of Tibetan. The chief of staff felt a bit embarrassed and promptly recited the Vajrasattva mantra, Om Vajrasattvaham. In fact, he didn't need to recite the mantra merely for saying tractor in Chinese. However, when you have a negative thought or speak ill of others, you must recite the mantra. Yet many people have not formed this habit. Novice Buddhists, in particular, often do not feel concerned when negative thoughts arise. They rarely think, I am doing something wrong, which is quite troubling. In fact, taming the mind is crucial for a practitioner. In particular, the words of my perfect teacher contain supreme instructions. Here is another story about watching the mind from Patrul Rinpoche's text. One day, Geshe Ben attended a large gathering of Geshes at Penyulgyal. During the event, curd was served to the guests. Geshe Ben, sitting in the middle rows, noticed that the monks in the front row were being given generous portions. That curd looks so tasty, he thought, but I doubt I'll get my fair share. When it's time to distribute offerings at Larangar, some of you may think like this as well, especially when I distribute food from my spot. Those in the last rows might be thinking, I don't think I'll get my fair share. Oh, if only we had a Ben Kungyal here. Immediately, Geshe Ben caught himself. You yogurt addict. He scolded himself and flipped his bowl over. When the server approached and offered him some curd, he declined. This greedy mind has already taken its portion, he explained. Although there was nothing wrong with wanting to enjoy the feast alongside the other virtuous monks, it was the self-centeredness in his eager anticipation of that tasty curd that led him to turn it down. I have read the biography of Geshe Ben in the past. It says that sometimes when he had a bad thought, he would yell, Ben Kungyal, why are you always so self-centered? Sometimes he would even hit himself. The stories about how he dealt with his afflictions are quite fascinating. Some great masters of Chinese Buddhism are like this as well. Therefore, we practitioners must combat our afflictions and consistently examine our minds. Of course, ordinary people often struggle with strong negative emotions at first. However, if we always examine our minds in this way, choosing what is beneficial and avoiding what is harmful, our minds will become more manageable, and our thoughts will gradually turn positive. Long ago, there was a Brahmin named Ravi who constantly examined his mind. Whenever a negative thought arose, he would set aside a black pebble, and whenever a positive thought emerged, he would set aside a white pebble. Initially, all his pebbles were black, However, as he diligently engaged in positive actions and counteracted negative ones, the number of black and white pebbles eventually became equal. In the end, he was left with only white pebbles. A similar story can be found in the records of the Buddha and the patriarchs. Upagupta, the fourth patriarch of the Chan tradition, adopted the same method at the beginning of his practice. Whenever a bad thought arose, he would put aside a black pebble, and whenever a good thought arose, he would put aside a white pebble. At first, the majority of the pebbles were black, but 7 days later, he had only white ones. After this, his teacher gave him the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, which immediately brought him the fruition of Sotapanna, or stream enterer. Therefore, we should engage in positive actions as an antidote with mindfulness and vigilance, and avoid tainting ourselves with even the slightest negative actions. We should frequently pray for the blessings of the Guru, the Three Jewels, and the Dharma protectors. After all, the mind is compounded, and the blessings are incredible. If we can always pray, our minds will surely be transformed. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma says, "One who becomes a monk but leads a mischievous life will lose the Dharma and the title, become insignificant as grass, and be reborn in the lower realms." Conversely, if you consistently observe your mind with mindfulness and vigilance, and maintain the intention to help others and behave impeccably, people will naturally gather around you, just as birds flock to a pleasant pool, as mentioned in the Water Tree treatises. Furthermore, in the many lives yet to come, you will be reborn in the higher realms and ultimately attain enlightenment. Therefore, we should all rely on the Dharma to alleviate afflictions, commit virtuous deeds, and eventually embark on the luminous path of liberation.